morning again, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed your shots of coffee, your thimbles. I didn't get enough. I only had one. We're going to kind of slowly get this cranked because there's a bunch of people coming in from outside, but I wanted to do a brief introduction of myself. My name is Chris Boggs. I've been serving on the board of ICOM for 6 years now. The reason I joined the board was because I'm past chairman of SEMPO, which is the Search Engine Marketing Professionals Organization, which is the topic that really never gets picked here at ICOM. We never talk about search marketing. But anyway, I'm happy to introduce Yannis K. Luckily, the last part of his last name is silent, so Yannis is going to moderate our next panel and get us kicked off here for the rest of the morning.
Hello, everyone. I think this is the biggest crowd we ever had in a conference before lunch, so it's amazing. So we're going to talk about transformation. So what if I was to tell you that if you look at data from the last 5 years, only the last 5 years, the reality is that you can realize that half of the brands that exist today in this room will cease to exist in the next 5 years. And who is responsible for that? We in this room are responsible for that, because what we do, data, technology, and analytics, is really transforming the way consumers interact with brands, and it's actually, in many ways, it's also transforming the consumer experience itself. So we in this room have the responsibility, in my perspective, to start thinking about the survival of brands and the survival of businesses that exist today, and maybe some of them don't need to survive, but I'm sure there are businesses that we can help survive, and change our mentality about how we go on our day-to-day business, and shifting from optimizing the today to looking in the future, because survival is really very well connected with how we plan for the future. So in essence, what we really need to do is we need to fundamentally change the way we think about change itself. The fact that it's constant and the fact that we need to embrace it. But change is not actually something that is easy. Let me ask a very quick question. In this room, raise your hand if in 2018 you had a New Year's resolution, and I can see all of you. Who had a New Year's resolution? Come on. Any type of a resolution. Stop eating cake, taking the trash out. Okay, a lot of you. How many of you actually are now keeping that resolution? Okay, there's few hands. But the reality is, you are in good company if your hand is not up, because failure is actually much more prominent in transformation than success. About 70% of transformations fail. And failure happens for many reasons, and we're going to talk about that, and the panel today is going to discuss that. But failure, when it actually doesn't happen, it creates amazing results. And you can do that by looking at change as a catalyst and looking at the future as an opportunity. So we wanted to understand what really happens when organizations and enterprises change the way they think about transformation. We did a study, a global study of C-level executives. So I went into that study and I picked up the results specifically for people who are in this industry, for data, analytics, technology professionals. And what I realized is that there is really a bipolar issue happening, because we want to say one thing or we want to do one thing, but we end up doing something completely different. So if you look at the data, what's really happening is we want to talk about future, but most of our decisions are based on today. So 70% of us really make decisions based on the today, but only 30% of us, 70% of us wants to make decisions about the future, but only 30% of us actually do it. And what's even worse, when you look at the investments we actually make in data and analytics and marketing, 60% of us, and this is people like us making decisions, we don't actually think that those investments are big enough. Finally, 99% of us, I need to find out who's that one person, they actually think and believe that data can be valuable, but when you look at how much value we get out of it, 60% of us really they don't think that they can get value to create experiences, and they don't think that they can get value to make actionable impact in their business. So when it comes to technology, it's even more complex, because although we have done a great job, if you look at Google, Salesforce, Adobe, they have done a great job in selling us technology, the amount of integration that's actually happening is very low. So when we ask people what you can actually do with it, and do you have the technology, you can see 70% of us says we have everything, we have the stack, but only 70%, but also 70% says we haven't integrated to get value out of it. So clearly we need a plan, and things are getting actually a little bit worse when you look at the data, because when we ask people, do you really believe you are a change engine in the organization, 60% of us said that we're not the game changers. So that mentality also needs to change. And some of the reasons that we mentioned as being important is silos actually prohibiting us from integrating together and moving transformation forward, chemistry in our teams, and also our ability to look at insights to understand how consumers are actually changing and the behavior that is changing from a consumer perspective, to use that to drive transformation. So there is a change that is needed to happen, and everybody after me is going to talk about that, and we'll give you some examples of how different organizations are actually approaching this change. But fundamentally, there is a couple of things that need to help us reframe the way we think about transformation. One of them is that transformation is not something that can happen once. It's not a project. It's actually an always-on activity. And transformation is not something you do when you need to survive. Successful companies actually proactively go through transformation, and we've seen it in data that companies and enterprises that approach transformation as a proactive activity tend to overperform their business. The other component is that clarity and speed become more important than precision and certainty. So the ability to change the mindset of the organization to look at clarity and short-term clarity becomes very important. And lastly, data and transformation and transparency. Data gets into performance, so it becomes very important. And then transformation and transparency is a component of the use of data. Now, let's go and talk about some of the examples, and I'm going to give the microphone to James from Unilever and Kurt from DataQ to give you an example of how that works in enterprise.
Thank you. Thanks very much.